Marcus Thompson stood at attention outside Buckingham Palace, his red tunic pristine and his bearskin hat perfectly positioned. For 3 years he had served as a member of the Queen's Guard, a position that brought honor to his family and respect from his community. But beneath the ceremonial uniform beat the heart of someone who dreamed of soaring through clouds rather than standing motionless for hours. The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Marcus maintained his stoic pose. Tourists snapped photos, children tried to make him smile, and life bustled around him while he remained a statue in scarlet. His mind, however, wandered to the jets that occasionally streaked across the London sky. Each time he heard the distant roar of engines, his chest tightened with longing. Marcus had applied to the Royal Air Force flight training program 6 months earlier. The application process was grueling, involving physical fitness tests, psychological evaluations, and extensive background checks. His record as a Royal Guard worked in his favor. Discipline, attention to detail, and unwavering dedication were qualities any Air Force valued. The selection board had been impressed with his military bearing and his academic credentials from his engineering degree. When the acceptance letter arrived, Marcus felt as though his life was finally beginning. He had been chosen for one of the most competitive programs in the British military. The Royal Air Force Cranwell Flight School was legendary, producing some of the finest pilots in the world. Only the best of the best made it through the rigorous training program, and Marcus was determined to be among them. His fellow guards congratulated him, though some expressed surprise that he would leave such a prestigious posting. His commanding officer, Colonel Harrison, had given him a firm handshake and told him to make the regiment proud. Marcus's parents, both former military themselves, beamed with pride when he called to share the news. His younger sister, Emma, studying aerospace engineering at university, screamed with excitement over the phone. The transition from ceremonial duties to flight training was jarring. At Cranwell, Marcus traded his ornate uniform for flight suits and his rifle for textbooks on aerodynamics. The academic portion of training was intense. Physics, meteorology, navigation, and aircraft systems filled his days. He excelled in ground school, his engineering background giving him an edge in understanding the complex systems that kept aircraft aloft. Physical training pushed him to new limits. While Royal Guard duty required stamina and the ability to stand motionless for extended periods, flight training demanded agility, quick reflexes, and the ability to function under extreme G-forces. Marcus threw himself into every exercise, determined to prove he belonged among the future pilots of the RAF. His instructors took notice of his dedication. Flight Lieutenant Sarah Chen, a veteran pilot who had flown missions over Afghanistan, became something of a mentor. She appreciated Marcus's methodical approach to learning and his respect for the aircraft. During simulator sessions, he demonstrated natural spatial awareness and steady hands under pressure. The first time Marcus actually took controls of a training aircraft, a Tucano T-1, he felt a rush unlike anything he had experienced standing guard at the palace. The ground fell away beneath him as the instructor pilot guided him through basic maneuvers. The sensation of flight was everything he had imagined and more: freedom, power, and a view of the world that few people ever experienced. For weeks, Marcus progressed steadily through the training syllabus. He mastered radio procedures, learned to read weather patterns, and practiced emergency procedures until they became second nature. His logbook filled with flying hours, each entry bringing him closer to his goal of earning his wings. Fellow students respected him for his work ethic and his willingness to help others who struggled with difficult concepts. However, success in flight training required more than just dedication and skill. It demanded split-second decision-making under pressure, the ability to process multiple streams of information simultaneously, and the mental flexibility to adapt when situations changed rapidly. These qualities would soon be tested in ways Marcus never anticipated. During a routine formation flying exercise in his 8th week of training, everything changed. Marcus was flying wing position to an experienced student pilot when weather conditions began to deteriorate rapidly. What started as light cloud cover quickly developed into a serious weather system with turbulence and reduced visibility. The lead aircraft began to drift off course as the pilot struggled with the challenging conditions. Marcus noticed the deviation immediately and attempted to radio a correction, but static filled his headset. He faced a critical decision: maintain formation discipline or break off to avoid what he perceived as a dangerous situation developing. Following his instincts, Marcus broke formation and initiated a turn back toward the base. The lead aircraft, caught off guard by his unexpected maneuver, reacted poorly and nearly collided with another student pilot in the formation. What Marcus intended as a safety measure was interpreted by his instructors as a serious breach of flight discipline and teamwork. The investigation that followed was thorough and unforgiving. Marcus's decision to break formation without proper communication was deemed a serious safety violation. Despite his excellent academic record and strong performance in other areas, the review board concluded that he had demonstrated poor judgment under pressure, a fatal flaw for a military pilot. The commandant delivered the news personally. Marcus would be removed from flight training immediately, with no possibility of reapplication. His dreams of becoming an RAF pilot were over, before they had truly begun. The official record would show that he had been dismissed for failing to meet the standards required of a military aviator. As Marcus packed his belongings and prepared to leave Cranwell, he felt the weight of failure crushing down on him. Phone calls to his family were painful. How could he explain that his moment of trying to ensure safety had been interpreted as reckless abandonment of duty? His sister Emma tried to console him, insisting that there would be other opportunities, but Marcus couldn't see past the immediate devastation. The journey back to London felt like a funeral procession. Marcus stared out the train window at the countryside rushing past, wondering what his future held now. The Royal Guard position was no longer available. His replacement had already been selected and trained. He faced the prospect of starting over completely, his aviation dreams apparently dead forever. Back in London, Marcus found temporary accommodation and began the difficult process of rebuilding his life. The rejection from flight school felt like a personal indictment of his character and abilities. He had believed in himself so completely, had worked so hard to reach his goal only to have it snatched away by what he still believed was the right decision in a dangerous situation. The months following Marcus's dismissal from flight school were the darkest of his life. He moved into a small flat in South London, surviving on his savings while searching for employment. Every job application seemed to require an explanation for the gap in his military service, and each interview became an exercise in reliving his failure. Potential employers in the aviation industry were particularly unforgiving once they learned about his dismissal from RAF training. Marcus found himself taking a security position at Heathrow Airport, a cruel irony that placed him within sight and sound of the aircraft he longed to fly. Every day he watched pilots taxi their planes to and from the gates, their confident movements in the cockpit a constant reminder of what he had lost. The roar of engines taking off overhead felt like a personal taunt from the universe. His family tried to maintain optimism, but Marcus could see the disappointment in their eyes during Sunday dinners. His father, a retired Army sergeant, suggested he consider returning to traditional military service, perhaps applying for a commission in the infantry or artillery. His mother worried about his increasingly isolated behavior and his reluctance to discuss future plans. Emma visited whenever she could, bringing updates from her aerospace engineering program and trying to rekindle her brother's interest in aviation. She shared stories about new aircraft designs, advanced flight systems, and the exciting developments in military aviation technology. While Marcus appreciated her efforts, each conversation only deepened his sense of loss and regret. The security work at Heathrow was mind-numbing but gave Marcus time to think. He watched thousands of passengers pass through the terminals each day, each person pursuing their own dreams and destinations. Business travelers hurried past with important meetings awaiting them. Families embarked on vacations they had saved years to afford. And through it all, Marcus stood checking identification cards and monitoring security screens, feeling increasingly disconnected from the world around him. During his lunch breaks, Marcus often found himself in the airport's observation areas, watching aircraft operations with the trained eye of someone who understood what he was seeing. He could identify different aircraft types by their silhouettes, predict weather delays by observing cloud formations, and spot operational irregularities that casual observers would miss. His training at Cranwell, though cut short, had given him knowledge that remained sharp despite his circumstances. One afternoon, while observing a particularly complex arrival sequence during heavy traffic, Marcus noticed something troubling: A commercial airliner approaching the runway appeared to be experiencing landing gear problems. The aircraft was circling repeatedly, burning fuel and clearly in distress. Airport emergency services were positioning themselves, but Marcus could see that they were setting up in the wrong location based on the wind patterns and the pilot's likely approach path. Without thinking, Marcus left his security station and approached the emergency coordinator. He identified himself as former RAF flight training and pointed out the positioning error. The coordinator, initially skeptical of advice from a security guard, quickly realized that Marcus's assessment was correct. The emergency vehicles repositioned just minutes before the aircraft made a successful emergency landing, exactly where Marcus had predicted. The incident earned Marcus recognition from airport management and, more importantly, restored some of his confidence in his aviation knowledge. The emergency coordinator, a former RAF wing commander named David Wright, sought Marcus out afterward. During their conversation, Wright learned about Marcus's background and his dismissal from flight school. Wright listened without judgment as Marcus recounted the formation flying incident that had ended his military aviation career. As someone who had commanded operational squadrons, Wright understood the split-second decisions that pilots faced and the sometimes arbitrary nature of training evaluations. He suggested that Marcus's aviation career might not be over, just redirected. Through Wright's connections, Marcus learned about civilian flight training opportunities. While he could never return to military aviation, the civilian sector offered paths to professional flying that didn't require military credentials. Commercial pilot licenses, flight instructor ratings, and specialized aviation careers were all possibilities for someone with his background and determination. The challenge was financial. Civilian flight training was expensive, and Marcus's savings had been depleted during his months of unemployment. However, Wright introduced him to several aviation organizations that offered scholarships and training assistance to qualified candidates. Marcus's military background, engineering degree, and demonstrated aviation knowledge made him an attractive candidate for these programs. Marcus applied for every scholarship and grant opportunity he could find. He wrote essays about his passion for aviation, submitted letters of recommendation from his former instructors at Cranwell, and endured interviews where he had to honestly discuss his dismissal from military training. The process was humbling but also healing, forcing him to articulate why flying meant so much to him and what he hoped to achieve in civilian aviation. While waiting for responses to his applications, Marcus began volunteering at a local flying club. The club operated vintage aircraft and provided basic flight training to recreational pilots. Marcus helped with aircraft maintenance, ground operations, and administrative tasks. The work was unpaid, but it reconnected him with the aviation community and allowed him to observe flight operations from a different perspective. The club's chief instructor, an elderly gentleman named Roger Hartwell, who had flown Spitfires during World War II, became something of a father figure to Marcus. Hartwell had seen many young pilots struggle with setbacks and understood that talent and determination were more important than perfect training records. He began allowing Marcus to assist with flight instruction, teaching him how to communicate complex concepts to student pilots and how to maintain safety while encouraging learning. Under Hartwell's guidance, Marcus discovered that he had a natural ability to teach flying. His methodical approach and attention to detail, qualities that had served him well as a Royal Guard, translated perfectly to flight instruction. Student pilots responded well to his patient explanations and his emphasis on safety procedures. Watching others achieve their flying goals became a source of satisfaction for Marcus, even as he continued pursuing his own aviation aspirations. 6 months after beginning his volunteer work at the flying club, Marcus received acceptance letters from 2 different scholarship programs. The first offered partial funding for commercial pilot training at a certified flight school. The second, more surprisingly, came from an aerospace company that provided full training scholarships in exchange for employment commitments. The aerospace company scholarship was particularly intriguing. The organization specialized in developing and testing advanced military aircraft systems, and they were seeking pilots with both civilian credentials and military background for their test pilot program. The work would involve flying, prototype aircraft, and evaluating new aviation technologies, exactly the kind of cutting-edge flying that had originally attracted Marcus to military aviation. As Marcus read through the scholarship details, he realized that his dismissal from RAF training might have been a blessing in disguise. The civilian path offered opportunities and freedoms that military service never could have provided. He would be able to pursue his passion for flying while contributing to the advancement of aviation technology. Marcus accepted the aerospace company scholarship with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. After months of uncertainty and self-doubt, he was finally being given another chance to pursue his aviation dreams. The company, Meridian Aerospace Systems, specialized in developing advanced flight control systems and avionics for both military and civilian aircraft. Their test pilot program was highly selective, requiring candidates to complete intensive civilian flight training before progressing to experimental aircraft evaluation. The flight school where Marcus would complete his training was located in Arizona, far from the gray skies of London. Desert Flight Academy had a reputation for producing exceptional pilots, with training programs that rivaled military standards. The school's chief pilot, Captain Maria Rodriguez, was a former Air Force test pilot who had transitioned to civilian instruction after a distinguished military career. Moving to Arizona represented a complete change of life for Marcus. He sold his few possessions, said emotional goodbyes to his family, and boarded a commercial flight to Phoenix. Ironically, the first time he had flown as a passenger since his dismissal from RAF training. As the aircraft climbed away from Heathrow, Marcus watched London shrink below him and tried to push away memories of his last flight in military training. Desert Flight Academy was everything Marcus had hoped for and more. The facility boasted modern aircraft, sophisticated simulators, and instructors who brought decades of flying experience to their teaching. Unlike the rigid military environment at Cranwell, the civilian school emphasized practical skills and real-world flying scenarios. Students were encouraged to ask questions, challenge procedures, and develop their own flying styles within safe parameters. Marcus's first instructor was Jake Martinez, a former airline pilot who had been teaching for over 20 years. Martinez recognized Marcus's military background immediately. The precise way he pre-flighted aircraft, his methodical approach to checklists, and his respectful interaction with instructors all marked him as someone who had received formal aviation training. During their initial flight together, Martinez was impressed with Marcus's natural flying ability and his understanding of aviation principles. However, he also noticed the tension that Marcus carried into the cockpit, a hesitation and second-guessing that suggested someone who had experienced a significant setback. Martinez had seen this before in students who had washed out of military programs, and he knew that rebuilding confidence was often more challenging than teaching basic flying skills. The training syllabus at Desert Flight Academy was comprehensive and demanding. Marcus progressed through private pilot certification, instrument rating, commercial license, and finally airline transport pilot certification. Each phase required mastery of increasingly complex skills and knowledge. Unlike his experience at Cranwell, where the focus was on military procedures and formation flying, civilian training emphasized navigation, weather interpretation, and the kind of decision-making that commercial pilots faced daily. Marcus threw himself into his studies with the same dedication he had shown as a Royal Guard and during his brief time at flight school. He spent hours in the simulator, practicing instrument approaches in simulated bad weather. He studied meteorology until he could predict weather patterns with remarkable accuracy. Most importantly, he learned to trust his judgment again, making decisions based on his training and experience, rather than second-guessing every choice. The other students at the academy came from diverse backgrounds. Some were career changers seeking new challenges. Others were young people pursuing their childhood dreams of becoming airline pilots. Marcus found himself serving as an informal mentor to younger students, sharing his knowledge of aviation systems and helping them develop the discipline needed for professional flying. One student in particular, Sarah Kim, reminded Marcus of himself during his time at Cranwell. She was brilliant, but sometimes overthought situations, leading to hesitation at critical moments. Marcus worked with her on building confidence, sharing his own experiences with failure and recovery. Watching Sarah overcome her challenges and eventually excel in her training gave Marcus a sense of purpose that he had been missing since leaving the military. As Marcus progressed through his training, Word of his background began to spread among the instructors and staff. His story of dismissal from RAF training, followed by his determination to pursue civilian aviation, resonated with many who had faced their own setbacks in aviation careers. Captain Rodriguez took particular interest in his development, recognizing qualities that would serve him well as a test pilot. The commercial pilot check ride was Marcus's first major milestone. The designated examiner was known for his thorough and demanding standards, and many students required multiple attempts to pass. Marcus approached the test with careful preparation, reviewing every procedure and rehearsing every maneuver until they became automatic responses. The oral examination portion covered everything, from federal aviation regulations to aircraft systems to weather theory. Marcus answered each question with precision and confidence, drawing on his engineering background and military training to provide comprehensive responses. The examiner seemed surprised by the depth of Marcus's knowledge and his ability to explain complex concepts clearly. The flight portion of the check ride involved a cross-country flight with various emergencies and challenging scenarios. Marcus handled each situation smoothly, from simulated engine failures to navigation equipment malfunctions. His decision-making was sound, his flying was precise, and his communication with air traffic control was professional and clear. When the examiner handed Marcus his temporary commercial pilot certificate, it felt like a vindication of everything he had endured since leaving RAF training. He was no longer a failed military pilot. He was a certified commercial aviator, with skills that opened doors throughout the aviation industry. Captain Rodriguez called Marcus into her office the day after his check ride. She had been in contact with Meridian Aerospace Systems, providing regular updates on his progress. The company was impressed with his academic performance and his demonstrated flying ability. They were ready to move forward with the next phase of his development. The transition to test pilot training would require Marcus to move again, this time to Nevada, where Meridian operated its flight test facility. The work would involve flying aircraft that were often one-of-a-kind prototypes, evaluating new systems and technologies before they were approved for operational use. It was exactly the kind of challenging, cutting-edge flying that had originally attracted Marcus to military aviation. As Marcus prepared to leave Arizona, he reflected on how much his perspective had changed. The young man who had been devastated by his dismissal from RAF training had evolved into someone who understood that setbacks could lead to opportunities that were even better than original plans. His civilian training had given him skills and knowledge that complemented his military background, creating a unique combination that few pilots possessed. The night before leaving for Nevada, Marcus called his family in London. His parents were proud of his accomplishments and relieved that he had found his path forward. Emma, now in her final year of engineering school, was excited about the possibility of visiting him at the test facility. She had been following Meridian's work in advanced avionics and was eager to see firsthand how her brother would contribute to the future of aviation. The Nevada Test and Evaluation Facility looked like something from a science fiction movie. Nestled in the high desert north of Las Vegas, the complex consisted of modern hangars, sophisticated laboratories, and a runway that stretched endlessly into the shimmering heat haze. Security was tight, armed guards, electronic checkpoints, and clearance requirements that reminded Marcus of his days protecting royalty. Though the secrets here were technological rather than personal, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Meridian's chief test pilot, met Marcus at the facility's main entrance. A former Navy test pilot with degrees in aeronautical engineering and physics, Dr. Chen commanded immediate respect from everyone at the facility. Her reputation in the aviation community was legendary. She had been involved in the development of several classified aircraft programs and held multiple speed and altitude records. The orientation process took 3 days and covered everything from security protocols to emergency procedures. Marcus learned that Meridian worked on contracts for multiple clients, including the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and several allied nations. The company's specialties included advanced flight control systems, stealth technology, and autonomous flight capabilities. Much of the work was classified, requiring Marcus to undergo extensive background investigations and security clearances. The other test pilots at the facility came from diverse backgrounds, but all shared exceptional flying skills and advanced technical knowledge. Tom Anderson was a former Air Force colonel who had flown combat missions over Iraq and Afghanistan before transitioning to test work. Lisa Park had been a NASA research pilot, testing experimental aircraft at Edwards Air Force Base. Miguel Santos was a former Navy carrier pilot whose specialty was evaluating shipboard aircraft systems. Despite their impressive credentials, the team welcomed Marcus without reservation. They understood that good test pilots came from many different paths, and they valued competence over pedigree. His engineering background and methodical approach to problems quickly earned their respect, and his willingness to ask questions and learn from their experience impressed them. Marcus's first assignment was to work with the flight test engineering team on a project involving advanced autopilot systems. The technology could potentially allow aircraft to fly complex missions with minimal pilot input, using artificial intelligence to make navigation and tactical decisions. The implications for both military and civilian aviation were enormous, but the systems needed extensive testing to ensure they were safe and reliable. The test aircraft was a modified business jet equipped with sensors, cameras, and data recording equipment. Marcus spent weeks studying the aircraft's systems, understanding every component and how they integrated with the experimental autopilot. The engineering team briefed him on test procedures, safety protocols, and the specific data they needed to collect during each flight. Dr. Chen personally supervised Marcus's first test flights, occupying the right seat while he flew the aircraft through increasingly complex scenarios. The early flights focused on basic autopilot functions, maintaining altitude and heading, following navigation waypoints, and responding to air traffic control commands. The system performed well, but Marcus noticed subtle irregularities in how it handled wind corrections and turbulence. His observations led to modifications in the software algorithms. The engineering team appreciated his detailed feedback and his ability to articulate exactly what the aircraft was doing and how it felt to the pilot. Unlike many test pilots who relied primarily on instinct and experience, Marcus could explain the technical reasons behind his observations, making him invaluable to the development process. As the test program progressed, Marcus flew increasingly challenging scenarios. The autopilot was tested in bad weather, emergency situations, and complex airspace environments. Each flight generated enormous amounts of data that the engineering team analyzed to refine the system's performance. Marcus became skilled at flying precise test profiles while simultaneously monitoring multiple systems and providing real-time feedback to ground controllers. The work was demanding, but incredibly satisfying. Marcus was contributing to technology that would eventually make flying safer and more efficient for pilots around the world. His daily routine involved pre-flight planning sessions with engineers, test flights that could last several hours, and detailed debriefing sessions where every aspect of the aircraft's performance was analyzed. 6 months into his tenure at Meridian, Marcus was assigned to a new project that would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. The company had been selected to evaluate modifications to the F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world. The modifications involved new sensor systems and artificial intelligence capabilities that would enhance the aircraft's combat effectiveness. The F-35 program was one of the most complex and expensive military development projects in history. The aircraft incorporated stealth technology, advanced sensors, and networking capabilities that allowed it to share information with other aircraft and ground forces in real time. Meridian's role was to test specific upgrades that would improve the aircraft's ability to operate in contested airspace. Marcus had never imagined that he would have the opportunity to fly such an advanced aircraft. The F-35 represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology, incorporating systems that were decades ahead of anything he had experienced during his brief time in RAF training. The aircraft's capabilities were classified at the highest levels, requiring additional security clearances and specialized training. Dr. Chen selected Marcus for the F-35 program based on his performance during the autopilot testing and his ability to work effectively with engineering teams. The assignment was considered a significant honor. Only the most trusted and capable test pilots were allowed to fly such sensitive aircraft. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and intimidation as he began preparing for the most challenging flying of his career. The F-35 training program was intensive and comprehensive. Marcus studied the aircraft's systems in excruciating detail, learning about its stealth characteristics, sensor capabilities, and advanced flight controls. The aircraft was fly-by-wire, meaning that computer systems interpreted pilot inputs and controlled the aircraft's flight surfaces. This technology allowed the F-35 to be inherently unstable, improving its maneuverability, but requiring constant computer intervention to maintain controlled flight. Simulator training consumed weeks of Marcus's time. The F-35 simulator was so realistic that it was sometimes difficult to distinguish from actual flight. Marcus practiced normal procedures, emergency scenarios, and combat maneuvers until his responses became automatic. The aircraft's complexity required pilots to manage multiple systems simultaneously while maintaining situational awareness and flying precision maneuvers. The first time Marcus saw the actual F-35 test aircraft in the hangar, he was struck by its futuristic appearance. The aircraft's angular surfaces and metallic coating gave it an otherworldly quality that emphasized its advanced technology. Every line and curve had been designed to minimize radar detection, creating an aircraft that looked unlike anything that had come before it. Ground operations for the F-35 were unlike anything Marcus had experienced in civilian aircraft. The aircraft required specialized ground support equipment, extensive pre-flight inspections, and coordination with multiple technical teams. The ejection seat alone required careful fitting and multiple safety checks. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility as he prepared for his first flight in an aircraft that cost more than $100 million. Dr. Chen accompanied Marcus for his first F-35 flight, flying in a chase aircraft to provide guidance and monitor his performance. As Marcus strapped into the cockpit, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. From Royal Guard to failed RAF cadet to civilian pilot to test pilot flying the world's most advanced fighter aircraft, it was a path that no one could have predicted. The morning of Marcus's first F-35 flight arrived with perfect weather conditions, clear skies, light winds, and unlimited visibility across the Nevada desert. He had been awake since 4 o'clock, reviewing flight procedures and running through emergency scenarios in his mind. The weight of the moment was not lost on him. Less than 2 years earlier, he had been a dismissed RAF cadet with seemingly no future in aviation. The pre-flight briefing with Dr. Chen and the engineering team lasted 90 minutes. Every aspect of the planned flight was discussed in detail, from taxi procedures to test maneuvers to emergency scenarios. The F-35's advanced systems meant that even a simple familiarization flight involved complex coordination between pilot, aircraft, and ground support teams. Marcus's test objectives were relatively straightforward for a first flight. Become familiar with the aircraft's handling characteristics, evaluate the cockpit displays and controls, and perform basic maneuvers to assess the flight control system's response. The flight would last approximately 1 hour, with Dr. Chen following in a T-38 chase aircraft to provide guidance and observe his performance. Suiting up for the flight was a ritual that emphasized the serious nature of the mission. The anti-G suit, survival vest, helmet, and other equipment had been precisely fitted to Marcus's measurements. Each piece of gear served a specific purpose, from protecting him during high-G maneuvers to providing survival equipment if an ejection became necessary. The helmet alone contained communication systems, oxygen delivery, and a sophisticated display that projected flight information directly onto the visor. Walking out to the aircraft, Marcus was accompanied by a small army of technicians and support personnel. The F-35 sat like a predatory bird in the desert sun, its angular surfaces and matte coating absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Ground crews had been preparing the aircraft since dawn, conducting system checks and loading the precisely calculated fuel load required for the test mission. The external pre-flight inspection revealed the incredible attention to detail that went into every aspect of the F-35's design. Every surface, every panel, every antenna had been shaped to minimize radar reflection. The engine intake was designed to hide the fan blades from radar waves, while the exhaust nozzle incorporated features to reduce the aircraft's infrared signature. Even the weapons bay doors were shaped to maintain stealth characteristics when opened. Climbing into the cockpit was like entering a spacecraft. The F-35's interior bore little resemblance to conventional aircraft, with most traditional instruments replaced by large multifunction displays and touchscreen interfaces. The panoramic cockpit display provided an unprecedented view of the aircraft's status and surrounding environment. Every system could be controlled through the pilot's fingertips, with information presented in intuitive graphical formats. Starting, the F-35's Pratt & Whitney F-135 engine was a carefully choreographed process involving multiple ground crews and extensive system checks. The engine was one of the most powerful ever installed in a fighter aircraft, producing over 40,000 pounds of thrust with afterburner engaged. As the massive turbofan spooled up, Marcus felt the aircraft come alive around him, with displays illuminating and systems activating automatically. Taxi operations required constant attention to the aircraft's advanced systems. The F-35's nose-wheel steering was controlled through the rudder pedals, but with computer assistance that made the aircraft surprisingly easy to maneuver on the ground. The heads-up display projected taxi instructions and navigation information directly onto Marcus's visor, allowing him to maintain outside visual contact while monitoring aircraft systems. Air traffic control cleared Marcus for takeoff from the facility's primary runway, which stretched for over 15,000 feet into the desert. The extra length was necessary for test operations and emergency scenarios, though the F-35's performance meant that much less runway was actually required for normal operations. Dr. Chen had already departed in the chase aircraft and was circling overhead, ready to provide guidance and support. As Marcus advanced the throttle for takeoff, the F-35's acceleration was immediate and impressive. The aircraft reached rotation speed quickly, and the computer-controlled flight surfaces responded instantly to his inputs. Liftoff was smooth and controlled, with the aircraft climbing rapidly away from the desert floor. The sensation of flight in the F-35 was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. The aircraft felt more like an extension of his own body than a separate machine. The initial climb took the aircraft through 10,000 feet within minutes, with the powerful engine pushing them effortlessly toward their test altitude. Marcus monitored the engine parameters, flight controls, and navigation systems, while maintaining radio contact with Dr. Chen and the ground control team. Everything was functioning normally, with all systems operating within expected parameters. At 25,000 feet, Marcus began the planned series of handling tests. The F-35's fly-by-wire flight control system translated his stick and rudder inputs into complex commands to the aircraft's control surfaces, maintaining stability and preventing departures from controlled flight. The aircraft responded precisely to his commands, with none of the sluggishness or delay that characterized older aircraft designs. Basic maneuvers revealed the F-35's exceptional capabilities. Turns could be executed at G-forces that would have been impossible in conventional aircraft, with the flight control system automatically managing the aircraft's configuration to maintain optimal performance. The aircraft's thrust-to-weight ratio allowed for vertical climbs and rapid accelerations that demonstrated its combat potential. Dr. Chen's voice came through the radio with guidance and observations as Marcus worked through the test card. Her experience with the F-35 was invaluable, helping him understand the aircraft's unique characteristics and optimal operating techniques. The chase aircraft allowed her to observe Marcus's flying from an external perspective, monitoring his formation skills and overall aircraft handling. The most impressive demonstration came when Marcus engaged the aircraft's sensor systems. The F-35's distributed aperture system provided 360-degree situational awareness, with cameras and sensors feeding information to his helmet display. He could literally see through the aircraft's floor and walls, with infrared and optical imagery, combined to create an unprecedented view of the surrounding environment. 45 minutes into the flight, Marcus began preparing for the return to base. The F-35's fuel consumption had been higher than expected due to the extensive maneuvering, but well within acceptable limits for a test flight. Air traffic control provided vectors for the approach, with Dr. Chen remaining in formation to observe the landing. The approach and landing showcased the F-35's advanced flight control system. The aircraft could be flown with precision even at slow speeds, with the computers automatically adjusting control surface positions to maintain stability. Marcus found the aircraft remarkably easy to control during the approach, with predictable responses to throttle and flight control inputs. Touchdown was smooth and controlled, with the aircraft's advanced braking system bringing it to a stop well within the available runway length. Ground crews marshaled Marcus to the parking area, where post-flight procedures would begin immediately. The flight had been a complete success, with all test objectives accomplished and no discrepancies noted. As Marcus shut down the systems and climbed out of the cockpit, he was greeted by the engineering team and facility personnel who had monitored the flight. Dr. Chen landed shortly afterward and immediately began discussing his performance and observations. The consensus was that Marcus had demonstrated excellent flying skills and had adapted quickly to the F-35's unique characteristics. The post-flight debrief lasted 2 hours and covered every aspect of the mission. Marcus provided detailed feedback on the aircraft's handling, cockpit design, and system performance. His engineering background allowed him to offer insights that were valuable to the development team, particularly regarding the integration of various systems and the pilot's workload during different flight phases. Marcus's successful first flight in the F-35 opened doors to increasingly complex and challenging test missions. Over the following months, he became one of Meridian's primary F-35 test pilots, flying missions that pushed both the aircraft and pilot to their operational limits. Each flight generated valuable data that contributed to ongoing development programs and operational improvements for military forces around the world. The test program involved evaluating new software upgrades that enhanced the F-35's artificial intelligence capabilities. The aircraft's computer systems could now process sensor data and make tactical recommendations to the pilot in real time, effectively giving the aircraft a form of combat intuition. Marcus's role was to evaluate how well these systems worked from a pilot's perspective and identify areas where improvements were needed. One particularly challenging mission involved testing the aircraft's ability to operate in contested electromagnetic environments. Enemy forces increasingly use sophisticated jamming and electronic warfare systems to disrupt aircraft operations, and the F-35 needed to maintain its effectiveness even when its sensors and communications were being attacked electronically. The test took place over a specially configured range, where ground-based systems simulated the electronic warfare environment that pilots might encounter in actual combat. As Marcus flew the F-35 through the test area, powerful jammers attempted to disrupt his radar, communications, and navigation systems. The aircraft's advanced electronic warfare suite was designed to counter these threats, but the effectiveness needed to be validated through actual flight testing. During the mission, Marcus experienced firsthand what combat pilots might face in future conflicts. His radio communications became garbled and intermittent. Navigation displays flickered and occasionally went blank, and even the aircraft's radar was affected by the intense jamming. However, the F-35 systems adapted automatically, switching to backup modes and alternative sensors to maintain operational capability. The aircraft's artificial intelligence proved particularly valuable during the electronic attack simulation. When primary sensors were jammed, the system automatically shifted to alternative data sources and continued providing Marcus with tactical information. The computer's ability to process multiple inputs and present consolidated information to the pilot was impressive, though Marcus noted several areas where the interface could be improved. Dr. Chen observed the mission from a specially equipped monitoring aircraft, watching as Marcus navigated the challenging electronic environment. His performance was exceptional, demonstrating the calm decision-making and adaptability that characterize the best test pilots. Even when multiple systems were being jammed simultaneously, he maintained aircraft control and continued executing the planned test profile. The success of these missions led to Marcus being selected for an even more prestigious assignment. The U.S. Navy was developing modifications to allow the F-35 to operate from aircraft carriers in more challenging conditions, including night operations and severe weather scenarios. The program required test pilots who could evaluate the aircraft's performance in demanding shipboard environments. Carrier operations represented the ultimate test of pilot skill and aircraft capability. Landing a high-performance jet on a moving ship deck in rough seas was one of the most challenging tasks in aviation, requiring split-second timing and absolute precision. The F-35's advanced flight control systems were designed to assist pilots during carrier operations, but the effectiveness of these systems needed to be validated through extensive testing. Marcus's preparation for carrier trials involved weeks of specialized training at the Navy's test pilot school in Maryland. He learned the unique procedures and techniques required for carrier operations, including catapult launches and arrested landings. The training was intense and demanding, covering everything from emergency procedures to the psychological aspects of shipboard flying. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford served as the test platform for the evaluation. The ship was the newest and most advanced carrier in the Navy fleet, equipped with electromagnetic catapults and advanced arresting systems specifically designed for modern aircraft like the F-35. Marcus would be among the first civilian test pilots to operate from the new carrier's deck. Arriving aboard the carrier was an experience that reminded Marcus of his military background. The ship operated with the precision and discipline that he remembered from his days as a Royal Guard. Though the environment was far more dynamic and challenging, flight operations continued around the clock, with aircraft launching and recovering in carefully choreographed sequences that required perfect timing and coordination. Marcus's first carrier launch was scheduled for dawn, taking advantage of optimal weather conditions and minimal sea state. The electromagnetic catapult system was fundamentally different from the steam catapults used on older carriers, providing smoother acceleration and more precise control over the launch process. As his F-35 was positioned on the catapult, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of excitement and focus that preceded challenging flights. The catapult launch acceleration was intense but smooth, taking the F-35 from 0 to over 150 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds. The aircraft leaped off the carrier's deck and into the dawn sky, climbing rapidly away from the ship. Marcus marveled at the engineering that made such operations possible. Launching a 30-ton aircraft from a ship deck using electromagnetic forces seemed almost magical. The test mission involved evaluating the F-35's performance during various carrier approach scenarios. Marcus flew multiple approaches to the ship, testing the aircraft's handling characteristics during the critical final stages of carrier recovery. The ship's motion in the ocean swells added complexity to every approach, requiring constant adjustments to maintain the proper glide path and lineup. The F-35's advanced flight control system proved invaluable during carrier approaches. The computer automatically compensated for wind gusts and ship motion, helping Marcus maintain precise control during the demanding final approach phase. The aircraft's heads-up display provided precise guidance information, showing him exactly where to position the aircraft for a successful arrested landing. Marcus's first arrested landing was a textbook example of precision flying. The F-35 touched down exactly on target, with the arresting hook engaging the number 3 wire perfectly. The sudden deceleration from 150 miles per hour to 0 in less than 2 seconds was intense, but well within the aircraft's design limits. Ground crews immediately began preparing the aircraft for the next launch, demonstrating the rapid turnaround capabilities that made carrier operations effective. Over the following days, Marcus flew dozens of test missions from the carrier, evaluating the F-35's performance in increasingly challenging conditions. Night operations tested the aircraft's lighting systems and the pilot's ability to maintain visual references during low-light approaches. Rough weather trials demonstrated the aircraft's ability to operate safely, even when the carrier deck was moving significantly due to ocean swells. Each mission provided valuable data about the F-35's carrier suitability and identified areas where improvements could be made. Marcus's feedback was particularly valuable because of his engineering background and his ability to articulate specific technical recommendations. His reports influenced modifications to the aircraft's flight control software and cockpit displays that would benefit all future F-35 pilots. The carrier trials concluded with a demonstration mission where Marcus flew a complex scenario involving electronic warfare, adverse weather, and night operations simultaneously. The mission showcased the F-35's advanced capabilities and validated the modifications that had been developed through the test program. Naval officers and defense officials who observed the demonstration were impressed with both the aircraft's performance and Marcus's flying skills. As the carrier trials ended and Marcus prepared to return to the Nevada test facility, he reflected on how far he had come since his dismissal from RAF training. The young man who had been devastated by failure had evolved into one of the world's most experienced F-35 test pilots. His unique background, combining military discipline, engineering knowledge, and civilian flying experience, had created opportunities that he could never have imagined during his darkest days in London. The success of the carrier trials elevated Marcus to a new level of recognition within the test pilot community. His detailed reports and technical recommendations had contributed significantly to improving the F-35's operational capabilities, and his flying skills had impressed military leaders from multiple nations. Word of his achievements began to spread beyond Meridian Aerospace, reaching the highest levels of military aviation. Dr. Chen called Marcus into her office 6 months after the carrier trials, with news that would change his life once again. The U.S. Air Force had requested that Marcus be assigned to a special project at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The program involved testing experimental technologies that could revolutionize military aviation, and they specifically wanted a test pilot with his unique combination of skills and experience. The assignment would require Marcus to work directly with Air Force test pilots and engineers on classified programs that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in aviation. While the specific details were classified, Dr. Chen hinted that the work would involve technologies that seemed almost science-fictional: aircraft that could change their shape in flight, propulsion systems that defied conventional understanding, and artificial intelligence that approached human-level decision-making. Moving to Edwards Air Force Base felt like coming full circle for Marcus. The legendary test center had been home to generations of test pilots who had pushed the envelope of flight, from Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier to the pilots who had tested the early space vehicles. Walking through the halls where aviation history had been made was both humbling and inspiring. Colonel Rebecca Torres, the commander of the Air Force Test Squadron, welcomed Marcus with the respect accorded to someone who had proven himself in the most demanding flying environments. She had reviewed his records from both the civilian and military sides, and she understood the value that his diverse background brought to their programs. The Air Force needed pilots who could think beyond traditional military aviation concepts. The first project assigned to Marcus involved testing adaptive wing technology that could change the aircraft's aerodynamic characteristics in real time. The experimental aircraft looked conventional on the ground, but its wings could morph their shape during flight to optimize performance for different mission requirements. The technology promised to revolutionize aircraft design by eliminating the compromises that limited conventional aircraft performance. Flying the adaptive wing aircraft was unlike anything Marcus had experienced, even in the advanced F-35. As he moved the throttle and control stick, the aircraft's wings automatically adjusted their shape to provide optimal performance. During high-speed flight, the wings swept back and became thinner to reduce drag. When maneuvering was required, they extended and changed camber to increase lift and agility. The sensation of flying an aircraft that was constantly optimizing itself was remarkable. Marcus could feel the wings changing shape beneath him as the flight computer calculated the ideal configuration for each moment of flight. The aircraft's performance envelope was enormous, capable of efficient cruise flight and aggressive maneuvering that would have been impossible with fixed wings. Marcus's engineering background proved invaluable in evaluating the adaptive wing system. He could understand the complex algorithms that controlled the wing morphing and provide feedback that helped the engineers refine the technology. His reports led to improvements in the control software that made the aircraft easier to fly and more responsive to pilot inputs. The success of the adaptive wing program led to even more challenging assignments. Marcus became involved in testing aircraft that incorporated artificial intelligence so advanced that they could essentially fly themselves, with the pilot serving more as a mission commander than a traditional aviator. These aircraft could make tactical decisions, adapt to changing threats, and even learn from their experiences to improve future performance. During one particularly memorable test mission, Marcus flew an AI-enhanced aircraft through a simulated combat scenario, where the computer was given broad mission objectives, but allowed to develop its own tactics for achieving them. The aircraft's artificial intelligence analyzed the threat environment, planned an attack route, and executed a complex mission profile that impressed even the most experienced test engineers. Watching the aircraft make decisions that rivaled those of experienced combat pilots was both exciting and somewhat unsettling. Marcus realized that he was witnessing the future of military aviation, where human pilots would work in partnership with artificial intelligence to achieve capabilities that neither could accomplish alone. The implications for future conflicts were profound. Word of Marcus's achievements in the experimental aircraft programs reached the highest levels of government and military leadership. His combination of technical expertise and exceptional flying skills made him a valuable asset for programs that required the ultimate in-pilot capability. International partners began requesting his involvement in their own advanced aviation programs. The Royal Air Force, the same organization that had dismissed him from flight training years earlier, approached the U.S. Air Force with a request for Marcus to participate in a joint program developing next-generation fighter aircraft. The irony was not lost on anyone involved. The pilot, they had deemed unsuitable for military aviation, was now being requested by name for the most advanced flying programs in the world. Marcus's response to the RAF request was gracious and professional. He held no bitterness toward the organization that had ended his military aviation dreams, understanding that his dismissal had ultimately led him to opportunities that exceeded anything he could have achieved through conventional military service. His civilian path had given him experiences and capabilities that were impossible to obtain through traditional military advancement. The joint program with the RAF took Marcus back to England for the first time since leaving for Arizona years earlier. His parents met him at Heathrow Airport, barely recognizing the confident test pilot who emerged from the aircraft. The young man who had left London as a failed military cadet had returned as one of the world's most experienced test pilots, respected by aviation professionals worldwide. Working with RAF personnel was a surreal experience for Marcus. Many of the officers he worked with knew his history and understood the remarkable journey that had brought him back to British military aviation. His technical knowledge and flying experience commanded immediate respect, and his contributions to the program were valued by pilots and engineers alike. The joint program involved developing aircraft technologies that would define military aviation for the next generation. Marcus flew experimental aircraft that incorporated lessons learned from his work with adaptive wings, artificial intelligence, and advanced sensors. Each test mission pushed the boundaries of what was possible, exploring flight regimes and capabilities that had existed only in imagination a few years earlier. Emma, now a successful aerospace engineer working for a major defense contractor, visited Marcus during his time in England. She had followed his career with pride and amazement, understanding better than most what he had accomplished. Their conversations about aviation technology were now between equals, both respected professionals contributing to the future of flight. As Marcus reflected on his journey from Royal Guard to test pilot, he realized that his dismissal from RAF training had been a blessing in disguise. The civilian path had given him opportunities and experiences that would have been impossible through conventional military service. His unique background had created a combination of skills that made him invaluable for the most challenging and important aviation programs in the world. The story of Marcus Thompson had become legend in the test pilot community, proof that setbacks could lead to achievements beyond one's wildest dreams. Young pilots facing their own failures and disappointments looked to his example as evidence that alternative paths could lead to extraordinary success. His journey from the parade grounds of Buckingham Palace to the cockpits of the world's most advanced aircraft demonstrated that determination and adaptability could overcome any obstacle. Standing on the flight line at Edwards Air Force Base, watching the sun set over the California desert, Marcus thought about the young Royal Guard who had dreamed of flying while standing motionless outside the palace. That dream had been realized in ways that exceeded his most optimistic expectations, and the future held promise for even greater achievements in the endless quest to push the boundaries of human flight.